যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. It's a huge honor for us to have Dr. Birendra Prasad from JNU. Hello, sir. Thank you for coming on our
Oh,
podcast.
evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Just few days back, we discussed a research paper by sir, which was a counter to another paper that we discussed, written by Dr. Richard Eaton, claiming that it had basically two claims in the paper. One, that casteism could not have been responsible for the Islamization of Bengal because there were not enough Brahmins by then, and there was not really a popularity of the Chaturvarna system. Therefore, so it was not casteism that led to people leaving the oppressive system and going to an egalitarian system of Islam. And the second claim was that basically mass agriculture or agriculture was brought by Islam, the so-called religion of the plow, or the religion who brought rice to these lands. So sir's paper was a counter to the claim of Islam bringing agriculture into Bengal. So first we'll ask sir about that. Why Richard Eaton's paper must not be taken seriously, where he gets it wrong, and then we'll get to what really led to the Islamization of these regions of Bengal. So hello sir, thank you for coming to our
Thank you, Niranjan.
podcast. So sir, did Islam bring cultivation and agriculture to Bengal?
See, Niranjan, there has been a tendency among American scholars, particularly who study American history in terms of frontier syndrome. You know that settlers from Western Europe, they started arriving in Northern America and they gradually started expanding to the West, American West.
Yes.
So for them, the whole American landmass from the eastern coast to the western coast was a kind of frontier. So unfortunately, many American scholars, say for example, Richard Eaton or even Ralph Nicholas, they have somehow inappropriately adopted this model to understand the history of Bengal as well. And here, in Richard Eaton, you find a fundamental, interesting thing. Like many British administrative historians believe that before the arrival of the British in India was a kind of, you may say, quite a static civilization, same Oriental despotism and all that. So somehow Richard Eaton brings it a bit earlier. He says that, he means that, he indicates that before the arrival of the Mughals in Bengal, it was a static land, and it has to await the shift of Ganga towards the east, towards the present Padma channel. Before that, the eastern part was not connected to other parts of the Ganga Valley.
Right.
So that is the paradigm with which he begins. And this paradigm somehow totally negates the pre-Muslim history of Bengal. Many people, including me, many stalwarts, I don't count myself among them, I did my humble contribution to this land. So many have written on pre-Muslim Bengal,
Hmm.
and all the models propagated by these frontier historians, they are questionable. Take, for example, Richard Eaton. We were discussing his paper, Science Cultivators and Conversion Within Courts to Islam in Punjab and
Yeah.
Bengal. Now,
Hmm.
what does he say? That in Eastern Bengal, rice agriculture and Islam expanded simultaneously as a kind of
Hmm.
co-able processes. Actually,
Hmm.
he means that before the introduction of agriculture to Eastern Bengal,
Hmm.
Bengal was a tribal land, devoid of plough agriculture, devoid of Varnajati system, devoid of, you may say, urbanization and all that. So it was not a complex society. These things have started developing with the introduction of plough agriculture in this area. Now just think that in first of all, he never clarified what does he mean by Eastern Bengal. And that is most fundamental. Like say for example, Rangpur, it's a part of Bangladesh. Can you really treat it as a kind of as a part of Eastern Bengal? Rangpur or Dinajpur or Bogra or say this Mymensingh, can you really call them as Eastern Bengal? And they are not deltaic regions, they are not deltaic areas. So what explains massive Islamization in those areas?
Right.
But again, let me begin with a very basic thing. In the Mauryan period itself, Maurya, you are aware of the Mauryan Brahmi inscription from Thangarh. Now, what
Hmm.
does that say? It's basically says regarding the relief measures to be undertaken by the state officials during
Yes.
the time period of a famine. So,
Yes.
Bengal had this kind of complex society
Hmm.
from the Mauryan period itself. Of course, Bengal was not a homogeneous land, and I will come to this point later.
Yes. Yes.
But when I was trying to undertake a micro study of
Hmm.
uh, Sylhet and I mean not exactly Sylhet, but Surma Barak Valley.
Right.
What do you find that around 1100 AD itself you have references to plough agriculture, land being measured in terms of plough share.
Hmm.
That is the thing you are seeing in the most, uh,
Yes.
say, marshy part of Bengal. Sylhet, you are
Hmm.
aware of the landscape. It's a flooded zone.
Yes.
Almost 60% of landmass remains
Hmm.
underwater for almost
Yes.
7 8 months. So even in those
Yeah.
areas, even near the, I mean, if you read that inscription, it
Hmm.
refers to some plowshare, some hala of land
Yeah.
located near Sagar, which is a Sanskrit
Yes.
equivalent of modern Haor of Sylhet Barak Valley area. So even
Hmm.
in those marshy, flooded, forested zone, you have this kind of development. That is the first point. Second thing is that forest, they are quite common in pre-modern India. Which part of India was not under substantial forest cover
Yes.
before you may say the British period? You know
Yes.
that during the period of Balban, the Delhi
Hmm.
Sultan, there
Hmm.
were substantial forestation even on the outer boundaries of Delhi.
Hmm.
Continuous raids on Delhi used to take place by the rebels inhabiting those forest areas. Or if you
Hmm.
read ancient Indian literature, you will frequently come across Mahavana located just outside city gates. Like Vaisali, if you read just outside the city gates, just a few, I mean, at some distance from the city gates, you have references to a Mahavana. When the Buddha used to visit Vaisali, so he would not stay in the town, he would stay in some uh, accommodation in that
Okay.
Mahavana Vaisali. So forests have been quite a universal part of
Yeah.
Indian history. You can't really
Yes.
separate forest, vana, and kshetra. There
Hmm.
are continuous interactions. This
Yes.
whole claim that Islam brought rice agriculture to Eastern Bengal
Hmm.
and Due to this, it expanded as a religion of, as the religion, I am using his term, the
Hmm.
religion of Christ in Eastern Bengal. That is
Hmm.
somewhat I don't find convincing.
Yes. Sir, we have a interesting question here from an audience member. He is from Bangladesh. He is asking, I want to ask, sir, mentioned in the paper that Sylhet and Chittagong fell into Islam more than any land, yet the Chittagong had more Hindus than Muslims before 1947. How can then it be said that Islam was successful there? Or how did it happen that Islam was successful there?
See, Chittagong is not a homogeneous landmass. You have the coastal zone
Hmm.
and you also have the hilly zone. Plus,
Hmm.
you have the third factor, contiguity to Arakan and other parts of Burma. You know that the
Hmm.
Buddhist pilgrim coming from Burma, they would be undertaking that route. And
Hmm.
you know that you have continuous history of Maga
Right.
attacks on right up to
Yes.
Dhaka or Kumilla or even beyond.
The Mog
So
attacks. Yes.
contiguity to Bangla, Arakan and Burma is a
Hmm.
factor in
Okay.
that area.
Okay. And what was the spread of? How much was the spread of? How much was the popularity of the Chaturvarna system back then, before the arrival of Islam?
See, it's a very difficult question to answer,
Hmm.
but let me give you some broad parameters. This
Okay.
Chaturvarna system, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra,
Hmm.
in Indian history or in India, ancient India, it was not a universal phenomenon.
Okay.
Like south of Narmada, society was bipolar. One
Okay.
pole would be Brahman and rest of the society would be
Oh.
Sudra. And
Okay.
within the Sudra, you would have categories, you would
Hmm.
have hierarchy.
Hmm.
But technically, all rulers would be Sudra. So that
Oh.
was the case south of Narmada. Again, that
Okay.
was the case east of Bihar as well.
Oh.
This Chaturvarna system,
I
Brahman,
see.
Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, some would, of course, some powerful rulers, they may claim Kshatriya status, but you just remember that even the Pala, they did not bother to claim this Kshatriya
Right.
status.
Right.
But of course, you have presence of Brahmins in almost all
Hmm.
parts of Bengal.
Right.
If you study inscriptions, you have references to Brahman Mahattara and
Right.
all that in all parts of Bengal.
Right.
So this is not the case that Eastern Bengal or Bengal as a whole was outside the pale of Varna Jati system. That was not the
Okay.
case. Or if you
Okay.
read alternate sources, like if you read Charyapada,
Hmm.
now here you would find the voices of the lower castes,
Hmm.
Chandali, Jan Matangi, and all that.
Right.
Chandal and
Right.
Matang and all that. So this
Yes.
is not the case that Varna Jati system was not present in Eastern Bengal. And this
Okay.
is also not
Yeah.
the case that people did not resent Brahmanical hegemony. Things
Oh, right.
don't develop in vacuum. If you
Hmm.
read W. Hunter's account, he wrote a statistical accounts of different districts of Bengal.
Hmm.
To read his accounts of statistics. So
Hmm.
there he refers to this Chandal population. And he
Yeah.
was surprised to know that he was surprised to note that they used to inhabit most marshy parts of Dhaka district, which would
Okay.
be surrounded by floodwaters almost all over the years.
Okay.
And they would never leave those marshy areas. Upon inquiry, inquired with some Chandal, which later
Hmm.
claimed to be Namsotra. So why don't you
Okay.
go to why don't you go to urban centers? And
Hmm.
some replied to him that they were in the past cursed by a Brahmin of great sanctity of Dhaka area. So
Okay.
they do not go to that area out of that fear. So
Hmm.
this conflict you also find. This is not the case that this is a conflict free zone.
Hmm.
You need to see pre-Islamic Bengal, you need to look into a kind of society, or I give Bengal as a whole, on the whole,
Hmm.
read B.M. Morrison, Political Centers and Cultural Regions in early Bengal. So that's a wonderful book. Now,
Okay.
on the analysis of inscriptions, he found that there were at least four sub-regions of
Hmm.
what you now call Bengal, undivided Bengal, I mean.
Hmm.
So one was Varendra.
Hmm.
That was the land between, you may say, today Jamuna and Mahananda, bounded by, you may say, Padma in the
Hmm.
south.
Okay.
So that is the most developed part of ancient Bengal. Here property relations were fully developed.
Hmm.
And this is the part which had the most complex society of
Oh.
ancient and medieval Bengal. Then you have
Hmm.
Rad. So the land to the east of today, you may say Bhagirathi Hooghly. Again, within that, you have divisions. Some
Hmm.
areas like Purulia, they remained out of pale for
Hmm.
much of the developments taking place in alluvial Bengal for a long time.
Hmm.
There you had the very strong presence of Jainism, more or
Hmm.
less similar was the case with, you may say, Bakura area. But the
Hmm.
more west you go, western part of, you may say, Bardhaman district, Bakura, Purulia, or western Medinipur. So these
Hmm.
are the stronghold of Jainism. Here Buddhism had very marginal presence.
Okay.
Then the land between Bhagirathi, Hooghly, and you may say Padma,
Hmm.
right up to the sea. So that is the ancient Vanga.
Right.
And the land east of Meghna Surma that he calls Samatat Harikale. So in that you have Silhat, Komilla, and Chitkor. Now he
Okay.
finds that except Samatat Harikale, in all parts of these Varendra, Rad, and Vanga, they were fully integrated into with the cultures of Middle Ganga Valley.
Okay.
There was practically, he says that there were heartlands of Brahmanism in the Delta. But
Okay.
the land to the east of Surma Meghna, it had a slight difference.
Hmm.
The other studies have also been taken, like I plotted the distribution pattern of sculptures, other archaeological markers.
Hmm.
Now, what do you find that except this Purulia or to some extent Bakura or Western Bardhaman,
Hmm.
you see the presence of Buddhism in all parts of Bengal.
Hmm.
Similarly, Brahmanism, that was the universal religion of ancient Bengal. The only
Okay.
part of Bengal which did not show any kind of integration with any other part of Bengal, what you may say this, what you call, geographers call Madhupur jungle. So you
Okay.
begin Tangail area of Dhaka, you begin from there and go right up to the hills of Meghalaya. So basically Singh and adjoining areas. Now here no Buddhist sculpture, Hindu sculpture, Jaina sculptures, inscriptions, other kind
Hmm.
of archaeological markers of presence of any organized religion have not been found, have not been reported from that area.
I see.
Except that area, and you know that in that area you have the survival of this Koch and Rajbangshi and all other tribal zones right
Right.
up to, you may say, the arrival of the British. So
Hmm.
except this a small patch, I
Hmm.
don't find any other part of Bengal which was not integrated to the cultures of rest of Bengal or to the cultures of Middle Ganga Valley. That is the first thing.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
second thing you need to take into account is that, of course, you have simultaneous expansion of both Buddhism and Hinduism
Hmm.
in all parts of Bengal except Purulia, Bakura, that is the exception, and Western
Hmm.
Bardhaman.
Hmm.
But you find a difference in the nature of expansion of Buddhism and Brahmanism.
Hmm.
Buddhist monuments, they are monumental in nature, Paharpur or Manamati, and so on and so on. Of course, you have Buddhist shrines as well, functioning independently of
Hmm.
these monastic centers. But rest of Bengal, Brahmanism had a more diffused expansion, and its support base was more diffused, more wide, more deep rooted.
Hmm.
And you know that it was due to this factor that even the Pala rulers, the greater portion of their patronage went in favor of Brahmins and Brahmanical institutions. Buddhist institutions, they were only, you may say, 75% of Pala patronage is going to Brahmins and Brahmanical institutions, then 25% would be going something like that, not exactly in a statistical term. But what you find is that despite the coexistence of both religions, you have evidences of simmering confrontation between both religions. Now take the case of Dhaka Komilla area. Now here you have many reported examples of Heruk sculptures. Now who is Heruk? Heruk is a Vajrayan warrior god. And
Okay.
what is he supposed to do? He comes in a ferocious form, and if you read his iconography, it's quite, ferocious. But if you read his functions, why do you worship him or what he is supposed to do? Now, if you read Vajrayana Tantra, then the basic theme of Feruk is that he would drive Shiva and his Shakti out of Jambudvip and convert all Saiva Peeth and Shakta Peeth into Feruk Peeth. So basically,
Okay.
He would win back Jambudvip for Vajrayana Buddhism. Now you have concentration of his sculptures in Comilla, in Dhaka. Some of these sculptures they could have been worshipped inside the monastic space, but many of them they were worshipped in independent temples. Now you imagine that the biggest reported sculptures of ancient Bengal, stone sculptures, happen to be these Heruk sculptures.
Okay.
Now just imagine they are said to be constructed around, say, around 1100 AD or so, or slightly earlier or slightly later. But if the stone sculpture is so big, say 6 foot long or more than human size, then just imagine the kind of temple that would have been constructed to accommodate those sculptures.
Hmm.
Then also just think that it's a public statement of confrontation. Somebody is actually constructing these temples, installing worship installing hero in them for worship. Can you do a similar thing today? You can't. There would be
No.
so public uproar.
Hmm.
Or just think of Paharpur, Sompur Mahavihar. Now there was a monk, Vipula Sri Mitra, and his prasasti has been engraved in Nalanda on one of the walls of Nalanda Mahavihar. And what does he say? That he was a resident of Sompur Mahavihar, and 3 generations before him, there was a lineage of monks whose name ended with Mitra. So
Okay.
Karunasi Mitra or something like that. He was the chief bhikshu, Mukhya bhikshu of that
Okay.
Sompur Mahavihar. And during
Okay.
his time, there was a determined attack on Sompur Mahavihar by an army of Bangala, that is Eastern
Oh.
Bengal. And this
Okay.
army not only burnt this entire Mahavihar,
Okay.
but also this Mukhya Bhikshu, he was put to death by burning and The inscription record that the Karunasri Maitri refused to move away from the dying from the burning Sompur Mahavihar.
Okay.
So he died there in that way. So this is the level of confrontation.
Hmm.
That is one aspect of Bengal which is not discussed by
Hmm.
many mainstream historians, this kind of confrontation.
Okay.
The third element you see, like you have examples, like
Who
you
was
have
the king back then? When Vangala was attacking that vihara?
the name of the king is unfortunately not mentioned in that inscription.
Okay.
Then you need to take into account third thing, that it is basically in those areas where Buddhism was very strong,
Hmm.
where this kind of massive Islamization have taken place. This kind of massive
Okay.
Islamization has taken place. Take
Hmm.
for example Sindh.
Hmm.
Now if you read the papers by Van Dyck Ball
Hmm.
or even this MacLeod, Religion and Society in Arab Sindh, now what do they find? That Buddhism had a very diffused presence in that area. In fact, if you read Van Dyck Ball's paper,
Hmm.
then he mentions that on the basis of analysis of many sources, he says that there was a hereditary bureaucracy of
Hmm.
Buddhist monks before Dahir, Raja Dahir, and they
Okay.
used to control that area from Sindh to Makran. And you know that it is
Okay.
the Buddhists who sided with the Arab invaders and they sided with the
Yeah.
Arab invaders in the hope that we will have a better time in future under the Arabs than under
Yes.
Dahir. Now
Hmm.
in Bengal, what you find that even before Islamic attacks, there is
Hmm.
a kind of, some kind of, you may say, slight identification between Buddhism and Islam. Say, for
Hmm.
example, recently an inscription has been deciphered by my friend Puroi. Now it
Okay.
discusses the endowment in favor of a Muslim to construct a structure which is referred to as Allah Vihar, a
Okay.
Vihar dedicated to
Hmm.
Allah. So
Hmm.
it could have been a kind of masjid or a madrasa. But what you find that the terminology used is Vihar, not any mandir,
Hmm.
not ayat. So even
Hmm.
in this page, around you may say 12th century AD or slightly earlier, it is
Hmm.
Buddhism which is providing vocabulary for the Islamic phenomena.
Hmm.
Now this,
Hmm.
and you know that Buddhism survived in medieval Bengal for quite a long time.
Hmm.
Recently, a Buddhist monastery has been excavated at Bathbeta. It's in the Magura district, just
Okay.
that side of Nadia district.
Hmm.
So here a monastery was established, Buddhist monastery was established in the
Hmm.
latter part of 13th century, and it survived
Okay.
right till you may say 15th century or so. So
Okay.
this is the background. So you can't
Hmm.
just see it Islamization of Bengal in terms of a binary phenomena from Hinduism to
Right.
Islam, and so you also need
Right.
to take into account the third angle.
Hmm. So, sir, this is a rumor I keep hearing every now and then, and I have never delved into it, so I have no idea whether it's true or not. Whether King Shashanka or some of the kings in the Sena dynasty were they distinctly anti-Buddhist kings, and they destroyed viharas as well.
Sasank, you know, his capital was Karna Suvarna,
Hmm.
and a Buddhist monastery was functioning right at the doors of his capital city. This,
Hmm.
I'm forgetting the name of the monastery, Rajbadi Danga. So a
Okay.
Buddhist monastery has been excavated at that place, and it was
Okay.
functioning even Sasank's period, rather it was expanding. So this whole thing
Oh.
that Sasank destroyed Buddhism, persecuted Buddhism and all that,
Hmm.
you can't really read when sang literally. In fact, if
Hmm.
you read Buddhist sources only without contextualizing them, you will find that in the Bhagavatam it is a Buddhist text of early century JD. So here
Hmm.
you would find that Asoka ordered the massacre of some 10,000 or so Jaina monks at the city of Pundarvardhana, North Bengal, Maharashtra.
Are you talking about the Ajivikas?
So, no, Jaina. So,
So
of course,
Ajivikas,
Ajivaka,
they did a
they
genocide
are
of
there.
Ajivikas as
So,
well,
he
right?
has no, we can't take those references literally.
Okay. Okay.
These are sectarian texts written with a
Okay.
sectarian background in mind. They are
Okay.
exaggerated. We can't take them literally.
Okay.
Same
So
is
they
the
are not a
case with
separate.
Wen Sang. When you say that, no, I don't think that Wen Sang's narratives of Sasank as anti-Buddhist, somebody who persecuted Buddhism and all that, I don't think that
Hmm.
that can be taken literally.
Okay. And the Sena dynasty?
Sena dynasty, even under them, you don't have instances of at least archaeological things I am asking. I am referring to. I am not referring
Hmm.
to literary sources.
Hmm.
Of course, they were proud Saiva, but we have very little evidence to support that they undertook some kind of a state-sponsored persecution of Buddhism. That does not appear to be the case.
Okay. Um, and now, sir, coming back to the Brahmin versus Shudra dichotomy in Bengal, how much was there oppression, and what do we mean by oppression, if at all there was any oppression from Brahmins on the all those Shudras, whether Namashudras or the Kaistas, etc., who were also Shudras?
I would be confining my analysis solely up to 1200 AD or so, not
Hmm.
later than that.
Hmm.
That is not my domain.
Okay.
Compared to Bihar, certainly Bengal was not a that kind of a stronghold of Varna Jati system as you say in Bihar or rest of
Hmm.
North India.
Hmm.
I have analyzed just inscriptions and archaeological data. So in
Hmm.
them I did not come across this
Hmm.
kind of picture.
Hmm.
Of course, this picture needs to contrast it with other sources,
Sir,
literary
sir,
sources and other sources, which I have
sir,
seen.
I'll just have to go to the door once. Give me just one moment.
Yeah. Please.
Wait. Yes, sir. Please continue.
So I will not comment on that beyond a limit.
Right.
What you just need to keep in mind is that Bengal is not a homogeneous society. What you say in
Okay.
Purulia or Bakura or Western Bengal might
Hmm.
not have been the case in Sylhet or Chittagong or
Hmm.
even Rangpur.
Hmm.
So let's not read things retrospectively.
Okay. And sir, we hear this all the time that the Pala dynasty was a Buddhist. Was that so?
Almost all Pala rulers they claimed to be Paramasaugat, that
Hmm.
is a great devotee of the Buddha in their
Hmm.
inscriptions.
Hmm.
But what you find that much of their patronage, as I have
Hmm.
discussed earlier, that
Yes.
went in favor of Brahmins.
Hmm.
Then you have examples of Brahmins being in charge of, or Brahmins being Tantradhikari.
Okay.
Tantradhikari, you may say something like cabinet secretary, modern
Oh,
term, use the term. So they were in
okay.
charge of the overall administration. Then
Okay.
you have also examples of Brahmins getting land grants for
Hmm.
reciting Mahabharata or even Rama
Oh,
to the
okay.
queen. So this is not the case. See, in pre-modern India, particularly in ancient India, you don't have a situation of either or syndrome that you can either
Hmm.
be a Hindu or a Buddhist. That is not
Hmm.
the case. Buddhism, from the very beginning, it left certain areas, by
Hmm.
areas I mean domain of society,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
the exclusive control of Brahmins.
Hmm.
One such domain was what sociologists call rites de passage, life cycle rituals, sanskar.
Hmm.
So even when
Hmm.
the Buddha died, his last rituals, the sanskar, was presided over by a Brahmin.
Okay.
So Buddhist monks in India, they never
Hmm.
bothered to devise anything to regulate what you call religion of a man in society.
Hmm.
This was left exclusively to the Brahmins. And the
Hmm.
palace, they could not overturn this structure.
Hmm.
So what you find is that they patronized Brahmins in a massive way, or if you go even east of
Hmm.
Meghna, the Chandra rulers, Chandra
Hmm.
dynasty. Now,
Hmm.
much of their recorded patronage that went in favor of Brahmins. In
Hmm.
fact, the Chandra dynasties, none of the reported copper plates so far record any kind of patronage to any Buddhist monastery.
Hmm.
But what you find that they would settle some 6,000 Brahmins in Silat,
Yes.
administrative restructuring would be done, and the whole
Hmm.
area would be named after the ruling king, Sri Chandra,
Hmm.
on the name of the ruling king. So this
Hmm.
kind of situation is there. So this
Hmm.
reading that Palas were Buddhist and Senas were Buddhist, that could have been their religion in their personal faith, but
Hmm.
Buddhism was
Okay.
not the religion of the state. It was not a
Oh,
state religion.
okay. Then, uh, okay. Anyway, I'll ask that later. This is a relevant question, so we'll just. You've already touched upon this a little bit. Sir, why did Buddhist kings give land to Brahmins? How was the relationship between Buddhism and Brahmins?
The first question, why did Buddhist kings gave land to Brahmins? Now this
Hmm.
is a complex question.
Hmm.
When you are giving land to anyone, you are basically parting away with your revenue
Hmm.
base in
Hmm.
perpetuity. So unless the
Hmm.
king gets something very fundamental in return,
Hmm.
and this thing could be ideological, material, it could be many things. It
Hmm.
could be anything. So unless the
Hmm.
king gets some fundamentally significant thing in return, he would not part away with his land, his revenue base. Now just
Okay.
take one example. Take the case of Satavahana dynasty, Deccan,
Hmm.
early
Hmm.
century JD. Now in
Hmm.
their inscriptions, they proudly claimed to be Eko Brahmana, that we are
Hmm.
the best Brahmin.
Hmm.
We are the foremost Brahmin, or we are the only Brahmin. So
Hmm.
technically, they claimed that we are a Brahmin dynasty, all the kings.
Hmm.
But much of their recorded land grants that went in favor of Buddhist monasteries.
Hmm.
So that was in early century AD, Deccan, Andhra,
Hmm.
Maharashtra, and adjoining areas.
Hmm.
Now, why would they do that? So basically, this question has been looked into by my teacher, Himanshu Prabhare. And
Okay.
what he said that Buddhist monasteries, they represented the most developed form of institutional religion in that area. And
Hmm.
they where instrument swap controlling villages in an area where just a secondary estate formation has taken place, where on institutional apparatus of the estate was weak. So here the king would take advantage of the networks of a Buddhist monastery. That was the case in, so a Brahmin dynasty would take advantage of the network of the Buddhist monasteries in that area. Or just think of
Hmm.
Bengal. Here, as we have
Hmm.
discussed, Hinduism had a more diffused presence in the ground.
Hmm.
Their support base was more wide. They had patronage from a greater segment of society. They were
Hmm.
influential among a much greater segment of society.
Hmm.
So the Buddhist king, the Pala dynasty, would try to keep them in good humor.
Hmm.
That would be one of the factors behind greater Pala patronage to Brahmins. Or just
Hmm.
come to that area east of Surma Meghna. Now
Hmm.
that is marshy, forested, and here from the very beginning in Sylhet particularly. Here kings relied on Brahmanical institutions for agrarian expansion, bringing
Hmm.
work land under cultivation, detribalization. Even when Buddhist monastery was already present in that area, but the king did not engage with that Buddhist monastery, Sri Chandra. But instead he relied on the Brahmins.
Hmm.
The basic question would be that Brahmins offered more practical things in return to the Buddhist kings,
Hmm.
so they received greater patronage from the Palas, from the Chandras.
Right.
And second question, what was the nature of relationship between Buddhism and Brahmins?
Right.
I
Yes.
have already discussed, I think.
Yes.
But
Yes.
of course, one more thing must be noted here that
Hmm.
Brahmins they formed a very dominant position within Buddhist Bhikshu Sangha from the
Okay.
period of the Buddha
Hmm.
to the decline of Buddhism in Indian subcontinent. They
Okay.
provided the intellectual leadership. They also
Hmm.
provided organizational leadership.
I see. So, sir, then how do you see the modern, I guess, made-up conflict between Buddhism and Hinduism, or the Navayani Hinduism, Buddhism and Hinduism, or so many historians from JNU themselves claiming that Buddhist kings were going around oppressing Buddhist scholars, Hindu kings were going around oppressing Buddhist scholars every now and then, burning down their viharas, etc. Where is all that research coming from then?
Some examples, of course, come from Bengal.
Hmm.
Then Sompur Mahavihar inscription I have just referred to.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, this kind of example you don't come across in Bihar. Of course, both were ruled by the
Hmm.
same dynasty,
Hmm.
Palaj or Senaj. So
Right.
generally, you can't find these kind of examples in Bihar, but
Hmm.
you do find them in Bengal.
Hmm.
So, but these are isolated examples. See, if you need
Hmm.
to see the relationship between Buddhism and Hinduism,
Hmm.
you need to look into three variables.
Okay.
First would be religious specialist within Buddhism, that would
Hmm.
be Buddhist monks.
Hmm.
Second would be religious specialist within Brahmin, within Hinduism. So that would be Brahmin priesthood.
Hmm.
Third would be common masses.
Hmm.
Now, this mass, this people, most of would not have any defined exclusive religious identity. Like
Okay.
in Dhaka
Hmm.
area, you
Hmm.
have an example that somebody installed a sculpture of Buddha
Hmm.
and he claimed that it was due to the Asirvad of Chandi that
Hmm.
this great act could be done.
Hmm.
So for the common message, religious identity would be very fluid. In the same village, you would have temples of, say, Vishnu. Vaishnavism was the most popular religion of early medieval Bengal till 1250 or so, or even later.
Okay. Okay.
In the same village, you would have temples of Vishnu, Buddha, Tara. Same villagers, when he goes to Vishnu, he would pay his respect to Vishnu. Then he would
Hmm.
pay respect to the Buddha and Tara. So this
Hmm.
kind of concept of watertight, exclusive religious identity that is not applicable in the case of common message of
Hmm.
ancient India, ancient Bengal, ancient Bihar. But
Hmm.
of course, conflicts were there. But now, who were in conflict?
Hmm.
So basically, these religious specialists.
Hmm.
Why? Occasionally, it would be due to, say, for example, Ravalin attracting court patronage. You know that
Okay.
Sompur Mahabihar, many historians call it Paharpur like Mandala Monastery. So it's a
Oh.
cruciform, central cruciform shrine of Paharpur Monastery. So in the
Okay.
center, you would be having Erochan, a Dhyani Buddha, surrounded by
Hmm.
four other Dhyani Buddha, cosmic Buddha, Amitabh, and others. Now,
Hmm.
many scholars they have looked into the symbolism of this particular kind of architecture.
Hmm.
Even Borobudur is distantly related to this Paharpur kind of architecture. So they are
Okay.
monuments dedicated to Vairochana. And these
Hmm.
monuments symbolized universal overlordship of the patron king or
Hmm.
patron dynasty. Take the
Hmm.
example of Vikramshila Mahabihar.
Hmm.
Now, it was famous as a center where tantric rituals for the
Hmm.
protection of Pala estates
Hmm.
they were performed there. If you read
Hmm.
Lama Taranath, he narrates an incident that the
Hmm.
famous ruler Dharmapala, Pala dynasty, he
Hmm.
visited there, Parpur, so Vikramshila Mahabihar. You know that this
Yes.
Mahabihar was established by him.
Hmm.
And the chief bhikshu, Mukhya bhikshu, told him that
Hmm.
his dynasty will be ruined after some generation, 2 or 3 generations. But if you
Hmm.
perform a particular kind of tantric ritual, it would
Hmm.
last for 30 generations. So Vikramshila,
Hmm.
or to some extent Paharpur, Sompur, Mahabihar, they had the product fame as being the centers offering magico ritual protection to the Pala estate. So if some
Oh.
rival estate comes into being, what would they do? They would attack this monastery. So that is
Hmm.
the context in which you can say, in which you can situate the Vipul Sri Mitra Prasasti. Why somebody would attack only this Paharpur Mahabihar?
Hmm.
So Mahabihar. Why not attack many countless small Bihar? Because
Hmm.
Paharpur had a particular kind of fame, or Vikramshila. It
Hmm.
had a particular kind of fame. So you need
Okay.
to take into consideration these factors also.
Hmm.
But I would just say that the case of generalized violence between Buddhists and Brahmins in
Hmm.
ancient Bihar or Bengal, that is not the case. You see the coexistence.
Hmm.
Of course, coexistence does not mean that competition was not there.
Right.
But for the common passage, this kind of generalized confrontation I don't see.
Okay. So, sir, this will be the last question on this specific topic. So, then you are saying that in some places the religion was pretty amalgamous. There was exchange of ideas, and both were getting represented. At least Brahmins were getting represented inside even Buddhist sanghas, and in some places the competition got so strong that they ended up fighting amongst themselves.
You mean Brahmin monkhood fighting with the Buddhist monks in Buddhist?
Or
Uh,
any pro Brahmin king even fighting with Buddhist monks, or burning things down, burning Buddhist things down.
you have one recorded example in Paharpur
Yes, yes.
that Vipul
Yeah,
Sri Mitra Prasasti.
yeah.
Then you
So
have
both were
some,
happening parallelly in some places.
both were happening. You see, you
Right.
need to differentiate between the religious practices of the common
Hmm.
masses and
Right.
religious practices of political elites and religious elites.
Hmm. Now, sir, therefore the next question is that you said that the Brahmins provided some more practical services to the kings, which is why they were also kept close by the kings. So, what kind of practical services? Just those magico rituals and stuff, magico spiritual.
First would be organization of society. Brahmins
Hmm.
would propagate a certain kind of worldview. The
Hmm.
king,
Hmm.
Jagdish Swarover, king is, I mean, you know that 30 years or so ago, the king of Nepal was an avatar of Vishnu. So the Brahmins, they
Hmm.
would always provide a kind of divinity to the king, not only within India, but right up to, you may say, Champa, Vietnam, Cambodia, even
Hmm.
on the island of Borneo, Java. So that is
Hmm.
one of their universal functions.
Hmm.
Second, since Buddhism is not providing you an ideology
Hmm.
for the maintenance of the social order,
Right.
it is the Brahmins who are providing this ideology.
Hmm.
And please keep in mind that any king, any dynasty would be quite terribly afraid of any kind of social chaos. So even these
Hmm.
Pala kings, they would claim in their inscriptions, proudly claim that they have, I mean, spread Varnasrama Dharma in its full glory in their
Hmm.
domain. Of course, that
Hmm.
is more a kind of exaggeration. But this Varnasrama Dharma that provided one of the ideas for the maintenance of social order.
Hmm.
So the Brahmins, they would be providing more stability, more legitimacy
Hmm.
to the king, to the kingdom, to the state. And in Silatarea, they would be providing greater leadership in the expansion of agriculture,
Hmm.
detribalization, acculturation of forested
Yes.
zones, marshy zones. So these
Hmm.
are some of the practices. These are some of the
Right.
things that the Brahmins suffered in. See,
Right.
as I have discussed in the very beginning, south of
Hmm.
Narmada,
Hmm.
don't have Chaturvarna system, but a state formation is continuously taking place in those
Yeah.
areas.
Hmm.
So anthropologists like J.D. Sontheimer,
Hmm.
German anthropologist, he
Hmm.
calls it the process from vana, forest, to kshetra, cultivated land.
Oh.
Or
Okay.
Professor B.D. Chattopadhyay, my teacher, my supervisor, he would call it aranya to janapada.
Hmm.
From forested space, you are converting it into somehow these zones are being converted into cultivated space, agrarian space.
Yes.
And when you are entering into more complex part of your society, say for example, an agrarian society would be certainly more complex than the forested society.
Hmm.
So here you would need an ideology for the maintenance of new society.
Hmm.
And here Brahmins played the more active role. They
Hmm.
would continuously help in the process of Kshatriyization.
Hmm.
The ruling chief, he would be declared a Suryavanshi or Chandravanshi Kshatriya.
I
He
see.
would be he would be connected mythically to some hero of Ramayana or Mahabharata.
Acha.
So more respectable genealogy would be
Right.
crafted
Yes.
for the new king on the basis of
Yes.
which he would demand obedience from rest of his population.
Right.
In some areas, Brahmins would bring plow agriculture.
Right.
So they would also helpful in the spread of new agricultural technology or bringing more land under cultivation.
Hmm.
Then local priesthood, they would be amalgamated within Brahmanism.
Hmm.
So they would be a new kind of Brahmin.
Hmm.
So this whole process, Brahmanization, Kshatriyization, rest of
Hmm.
the tribe, they would be declared Sudra.
Hmm.
So this whole process, Brahmanization, Kshatriyization, Sudrazation,
Hmm.
and expansion of agriculture,
Hmm.
plus new ideologies, the king is
Hmm.
divine, he is an
Yes.
avatar of Vishnu or he is an
Yeah.
connected to Arjun or Bhim or Ramchandra ji or Lakshman, these kind of things, you would
Hmm.
be continuously finding. So this
Hmm.
is one of the basic dynamics of Indian history.
Hmm.
As scholars, this process called Jati Karana. You
Okay.
bring new groups within the ambit of Varna Jati system
Right.
through this process.
Hmm.
And it is through this process that India was, I mean, much of India was having the ideas of Middle Ganga Valley, Upper Ganga Valley.
Hmm.
They are spread to rest of India. You are
Hmm.
aware of the examples of Tripura or even
Hmm.
Manipur Valley. The same
Hmm.
kind of Kshatriyization took place in that area in the 18th century.
Hmm.
The whole Metai group was, society was, related to, said to be related to Arjun and Chitrangada.
Hmm.
Take the case of the Masai state formation, this Karbi Anglong area or southern
Hmm.
portion of Silchar area.
Hmm.
So a tribal state formation took place around 16th, 17th century AD.
Hmm.
And this ruling king, the ruling chief, he was declared to be a kind of descendant of Hidimba and Bhimsen. So
Hmm.
they claim Kshatriya status. So now this
Yes.
is one of the basic dynamics of Indian history. Vana to Kshetra, Aranya to Janapada,
Hmm.
Jana means tribe to Jati.
Hmm.
That is one of the basic dynamics of ancient Indian history.
Hmm.
So you need to
Now,
see these things from a broader perspective.
yes. Sir, would it be then fair to say that Buddhism was just a personal religion, while Brahminism was more like the political religion, the ways of state formation?
In some areas, Buddhism did help in the process of a state formation or its consolidation or
Okay.
its legitimation. I have just referred to the case of
Yes. Yes.
this
Some
Satvahana
cases.
dynasty.
Right. Right.
But again, you need to differentiate between religion of a man in society
Hmm.
and religion of a man for his individual moksha, salvation.
Hmm.
So Brahmanism was more suited or continuously tried to be a religion of a man. By man, I
Hmm.
mean, of course, mankind, man and woman in
Hmm.
society. So
I
maintenance
see.
of social order, social regulations, social control, social relations. So
I
that
see.
encompasses a whole of thing. Buddhism or Buddhist monks,
Hmm.
they abandoned this field in favor of Brahmins in India. They
Hmm.
never bothered to regulate the behavior of their lay supporters. In this
Hmm.
case, they were different from Jainas. Jainas, you know that they continuously wrote codes of conduct for
Hmm.
their Upasak population.
Hmm.
Buddhists did not do. Only
Hmm.
example came from 12th century,
Okay.
Andhra. And that too, this text was written by a Singhala monk
Hmm.
in Pali language.
Hmm.
So one does not even know if Pali was at all a living language in India during those periods.
Hmm.
It was not written for a popular audience, for the common masses. So
Hmm.
this regulation of a man in society,
Hmm.
Brahmins had a kind of monopoly from the very beginning to the very end. And that is one of the reasons why Hinduism survived,
Hmm.
or even Jainism survived, and
Hmm.
Buddhism declined. And here I am referring to the very interesting paper by Professor P.S. Jaini, Padmanabh Jaini. He has
Okay.
argued on this line.
Hmm. So that will be the next question then, sir. Okay, how did the process of Islamization started? Okay, this was Buddhism's place in Bengal, as you explained. Brahmanism has a very specific place in Bengal. Then, how do people get convinced of Islam next? That I guess the fourth religion to come to Bengal.
It's a very difficult question to answer, but the paradigm propagated by Professor Richard Eaton, it is not
Hmm.
viable. That is for
Okay,
sure.
right.
That
That
Islam
people didn't
expanded as
convey,
a religion.
people didn't
Now,
convert because of agriculture.
some might have converted, some might
Okay,
have come under the influence of the Sufis who received land grants
right.
and people cultivating for them. Some might have got converted in that mechanism,
Hmm.
but that is not the only, or that is not even the major component of
Hmm.
expansion of Bengal, the expansion of
Hmm.
Islam in Eastern Bengal. You know,
Hmm.
for record, for the matter,
Hmm.
even till permanent settlement, Bengal had a problem of surplus land, which was under
Hmm.
cultivated.
Hmm.
But this paradigm that Islam brought plow agriculture to Eastern Bengal, it's
Hmm.
very, very difficult to agree.
Hmm. And how
Only
much was violence a reason?
Well, some medievalists will tell you the reason, but the thing is that there must be something unique. If violence, coercion,
Hmm.
inducement mixed with some kind of threat, if that was the reason, then
Hmm.
it was applicable from, you may say, Satluj to, you may say, up to Nadia
Hmm.
or even Malda. So Bengal
Right.
was no exception. Now
Yes.
it needs to be considered why this kind of massive transformation took place
Hmm.
in Bengal.
Hmm.
And why not to read Upendranath Mukherjee once again, A
Hmm.
Dying Race. I hope you are aware of this particular book.
No, sir.
So it was written in early 20th century, and Upendranath Banerjee, he apprehended that Hindus of Bengal, they are a dying race. Soon entire Bengal, particularly in the east, would be lost to Islam. And
Okay.
Hindus are a dying race. So
Hmm.
that was an early part of the 20th century. It's a very rigorously analyzed book. It's not just a kind of rhetoric. It's not just a
Hmm.
propaganda.
Hmm.
It's a very thoroughly analyzed book.
Hmm.
And here it discusses many things. But one
Hmm.
of the factors he tells, he himself was a Brahmin,
Hmm.
but he blames Brahmins for the ongoing Islamization of Bengal,
Hmm.
that they are indifferent to rest of society.
Hmm.
They hardly bother if somebody is living Hinduism. They just want the maintenance of their social superiority.
Hmm.
Then you also say that Hindus, they are physically not as strong, they are underfed.
Hmm.
Only the Goala within the Hindu, they are physically strong.
Hmm.
Then you also talks about marriage of Hindu woman to Muslim man due to he
Hmm.
calls due to within double inverted comma love. So he's
Oh.
probably one of the earliest persons to talk of this, what many now call love jihad and all that.
Hmm.
So it's a
Hmm.
very interesting book. It's freely available on internet.
Sir, can you
Read
tell the name of the book once again? Some people are asking about the book.
UN Mukherjee, Upendranath Mukherjee, A Dying Race. If you
Okay.
Google, you will find immediately.
Okay. Okay. And sir, how much was jizya a reason?
Well, these are quite, childish question. You
Hmm.
read Upendranath Mukherjee again. You do a
Okay.
program on that. If you want, I would be available.
Okay.
You read it. Massive Islamization, massive conversions don't take place just due to jizya or violence and all that.
Hmm.
Some internal fault line must be there
Hmm. Hmm.
on which external religions would make a palace.
Right.
Unless you have that kind of fault line,
Hmm.
this kind of massive transformations will not take
Hmm.
place. It did
Hmm.
not take place in Bihar. It did not take place in Uttar Pradesh. It
Hmm.
did not take place in Delhi. It did not take place in Madhya Pradesh, in Deccan.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
I see.
it did place in Sindh, where you have a big fault line, as
Hmm.
we have discussed.
Hmm.
So it's our duty to see what could have been the possible fault lines.
Hmm.
Pre-Muslim society of Bengal
Hmm.
on which these kind of developments took place.
Hmm. Sir, could you therefore, just as a gist, give 4 or 5 reasons total, including and excluding the fault lines, which led to the Islamization of complete Islamization of Bengal?
Some Bengali scholars should undertake in-depth research on this thing. My
Hmm.
written Bengali is quite
Yes.
weak. I can speak. I
Yes.
stayed in Barak Valley, so I picked up a spoken Bangla.
Hmm.
But it's the duty of scholars living there to look
Hmm.
into alternate kind of sources.
Hmm.
Say, for example, many Buddhist sources, like say, for example, Sunya Purana,
Hmm.
written in Bengal,
Hmm.
written by a Buddhist monk, and it
Hmm.
actually, I'm not sure if he was a Buddhist monk, but he was surely a Buddhist,
Hmm.
and it actually celebrates the arrival of Muslims,
Hmm.
attack of Muslims on Bengal.
Hmm.
And it says that the Buddha had sent these Muslims, Yavana, to punish these wicked Brahmins.
Okay.
So that could be, that is one of the voices.
Hmm. Yes.
Of course, that is not the only voice, but
Hmm.
that is one of the voices.
Yes.
Now you read alternate kind of sources, Buddhist
Hmm.
sources, Jaina sources. To
Hmm.
find out, you cannot read Bengal just on the basis of Brahmanical text.
Hmm.
So undertake a more in-depth study of alternate voices. See if any
Hmm.
fault line is there. If a
Hmm.
fault line is there,
Hmm.
to what extent it was responsible for this kind of massive cultural transformation.
Yes.
But why not to see the matter from the perspective of a person who is watching it himself. So why not to read Upendranath Mukherjee again?
Hmm.
He was observing things
Hmm.
from his very young careful age.
Hmm.
So why not to read him? Why not to juxtapose him with other kind of sources? When he was
Yes.
writing those lines, Islamic fundamentalist movements, they were
Hmm.
underway in Eastern Bengal.
Hmm.
So why not to contrast these things?
Yes. Sir, next, someone is asking in the comment section that why do you refer to dharmic religions as Brahmanism? Isn't that a sign of just mental colonization or colonial education system?
To a great extent, it is, and I'm sorry
Hmm.
for this,
Hmm.
but this word has been inculcated in my mind for the last
Hmm.
25 or 30 years. So I'm
Hmm.
gradually trying to get rid of this term.
Hmm.
By Brahmanism, I basically mean those who at least in theory, followed Brahmanical norms. So it's a very
Hmm.
wide term,
Right.
but both the use should be avoided. I will try to do that.
Hmm. Next, I need to know, sir, how did that process of detribalization happen, both at the hands of Buddhists and Brahmins? What was the procedure like? What were they doing in order to detribalize people?
As I have discussed this transformation from Vana to Kshetra or Anya to Janapada.
Hmm.
So many organized religions they were doing this. In fact, in fact, in sorry, just a minute.
Okay.
Take for example the case of Saivacharya, Saiva
Hmm.
Guru in Madhya Pradesh area. Now this fascinating study has been undertaken by Professor R. N. Misra of Northern
Okay.
Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
Now found that this area, this forested zone of Madhya Pradesh, that was technically under the control of different dynasties, but they have very little effective control, practical control in those areas. You know the
Hmm.
Chambal,
Hmm.
Pransing Tom, you remember?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so this area was inhabited by different tribes.
Hmm.
Technically, they were part of different kingdoms, but practically they were quite autonomous, quite independent.
Hmm.
But the thing was that many trade routes that used to pass through
Hmm.
this area, and the
Hmm.
king needed an effective control.
Hmm.
And here in this part of Madhya Pradesh, what you
Hmm.
find that many Saivacharya,
Hmm.
they would retire into forest for
Hmm.
tapasya.
Yeah.
This this forest would be tapovana for them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Gradually, he would develop a charisma.
Hmm.
Local tribal people, they would become very substantially influenced by the charisma of Saivacharya.
I
And
see.
the Saivacharya would emerge as their natural leader. Now,
I
once
see.
he has established himself as the natural leader in that area,
Hmm.
then the king would enter into system, into the picture. Now he would
Hmm.
start patronizing the Saivacharya to
Hmm.
bring him within his own network.
Hmm.
So that is one of the mechanism you find in ancient India. Or take the case of Silat,
Hmm.
quite forested, quite tribal.
Hmm.
What the king would do, a ruling Samant would do, Silat, from
Hmm.
the very beginning, Jalatavi, that is marshy forested land, would be granted in favor of temples.
Hmm.
So a temple would be there dedicated to Vishnu or Shiva, and the temple would be granted marshy land or forested land. Some Brahmins would be attached to that temple,
Hmm.
and the temple would gradually bring those marshy forested land under cultivation.
Hmm.
And the temple would interact with the local population. Ultimately, you have to mobilize local forces.
Right.
Say, for example, this Paschim Bhag copper plate inscription
Hmm.
of Sri Chanda. So, some
Hmm.
1000 square kilometer was granted.
Hmm.
So, you cannot cultivate such a big chunk of land on your own. So,
Hmm.
you need to mobilize local population, local labor force.
Hmm.
So continuous interaction would take place, and when here I agree with Professor Richard Eaton, he has
Hmm.
written this famous line is in his another article, Conversion to Christianity among the Nagas. So
Hmm.
here he begins his article with the line that in ancient India there is a continuous flow interaction between people of agriculture and people beyond the pale of agriculture. And in this
Hmm.
interaction, there was a mutual flow of cultures in
Hmm.
which the culture symbols values associated with the people of agriculture that found greater acceptance among the people of non-agricultural cultures.
Hmm.
Of course, people of agrarian zone, they were not immune to symbols and other things coming from one forested zone. But there was a mutual flow of culture in which this kind of detribalization took place. The jana, the tribe that gradually become a jati, that was brought under the phase of
Okay.
Varna Jati system.
Okay. Now, this will be the last question for today, sir. An audience member is asking, when it comes to Buddhism and Hinduism, the relations between both of them were very mishmash. Can we say the same about relations between Islam and Hinduism, or were those relations which turned hostile?
India is a very big country
Hmm.
and there cannot be a single pattern for patterns of interactions between any two religions.
Hmm.
But Islam, of course, is not like other Indic religions. Indic
Hmm.
religions had a different kind of, you may say, patterns of interaction. So
Right.
even when Buddhism is a kind of Gnostic religion, even then early Buddhism itself, Theravada itself, from the period of the
Hmm.
Buddha itself,
Hmm.
so they would not say that Brahma or Indra, they are not divine figures.
Hmm.
But they would say that they are, of course, divine figures, but they are not as, I mean, as holy, or they are somewhat junior to the Buddha. You know that somehow they are subordinate to the Buddha, or somehow they are devoted to the Buddha.
Hmm.
So that is the pattern of interaction you see. Like you take the case of Buddha, when he
Hmm.
got his Bodhi, Sambodhi at
Hmm.
Mahabodhi, so he was not willing to propagate it among the common masses. He thought that it's too, complex. Common masses would not be able to understand this. So let's keep
Hmm.
it to myself. Then what do you,
Hmm.
what do you find in early Buddhist literature? That Brahma came to him and
Hmm.
requested him that, Lord, you please propagate it among the masses for Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan
Hmm.
Sukhaya.
Hmm.
Take the case of Mahabodhi temple,
Hmm.
this Bodh Gaya temple. Now, if you read the accounts of Wensang,
Hmm.
so he mentions that there was a great Brahmin and he went to Himalayas, he undertook tapasya there, and
Hmm.
there Shiva came to him and he said
Hmm.
that you go back to Magad and construct a temple devoted to
Hmm.
the Buddha because
Hmm.
he is the most sacred being of this particular age.
Hmm.
So what you find is that here among Indic religions you have attempts of co-options, assimilations,
Hmm.
or a kind of establishing a kind of hierarchy of divinity. It's not a
Yes.
total rejection of, it's not like Navyan, I will not worship Buddha or Vishnu or, that
Yes.
was not the case. That was not the case in case of pattern of interactions between Buddhism and Hinduism in pre-modern India.
Yes.
Other things, what you see today may not be a good picture of the past.
Hmm. Okay. And sir, we have just two small questions. I'll just take those quickly. We were having this curiosity last day when we were discussing your paper. Did the name Howrah of West Bengal come about from the word Howd?
Could have been quite a possibility. However, it's
Okay.
a corrupt form of Sagar. And you know that Bay of
Right.
Bengal that was quite near to that area. So
Yeah.
this
And there
area
is a
is a part
Harwa as well. in South Bengal.
Could have been, but I don't have any
Right.
exact proof.
Yeah. Okay. And sir, this I know you discussed this already 2 3 times, but let's see if I can frame this more once again for him. What was the cause of enmity between Buddhists and Brahmins apart from intellectual rivalry? Could it be termed as just a rivalry over formation and administration as well and land, other than intellectual rivalry?
Attracting material resources, dakshina, patronage,
Right. Right.
estate favors.
Right. So Buddhist leaders had less charisma than the Brahmins.
It's a very difficult question to answer, but you
Hmm.
may just imagine that by 700 AD or so,
Hmm. Right.
the massive expansion of Buddhism was confined to only some zones of India, like Bihar. Even in Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa, even in
Hmm.
Bihar and Bengal,
Hmm.
Buddhist sculptures, Buddhist monuments, they would be found more in settled agrarian zones. Like take the case of
Yes.
Bihar, Jharkhand, and West Bengal.
Hmm.
So much of Jharkhand, you would be either Jainism or Saivism,
Hmm.
or much of Jangal Mahal, Purulia,
Hmm.
Bakura,
Hmm.
western portions of Bardhaman or western Medinapur, it would be either Jainism or different forms of Hinduism. Buddhism would have a very thin presence in those areas.
Hmm.
So there was a kind of a spatial shrinkage of a space for Buddhism,
Hmm.
and that was due to many factors. You need to do many, at least one more
Okay.
lecture on the issue of decline of Buddhism.
Right. And sir, do you believe the Brihad Dharma Purana is true about the Varna Shankara castes? And were they introduced by Kanoji Brahmins in Bengal?
Even before Brihad Dharma Purana, you have evidences of presence of Brahmins
Hmm.
in Bengal, right since the
Hmm.
Gupta period. So you
Right.
need to contextualize, you
Yes.
need to see things in a context.
Right. Okay, sir. Thank you very
You
much
have
for joining our live
references
stream. Okay,
to
okay.
you have
Okay, sir.
references
Go on.
to Kayas, you have
Right.
references to Brahmins in the
Hmm.
inscriptions.
Hmm.
So this is not the
Right.
case that this famous king, I'm forgetting his name, proud Brahmins from Kannauj and all that.
Hmm.
All communities, they indulge in some kind of self-legitimation.
Hmm.
So, but you need to see things from other perspectives as well, on the basis
Hmm.
of other kind of historical evidences as well.
Hmm. Okay, sir. And Amitav, Paul, for more context, you need to check out our live stream of the paper discussion of this professor only, which we did yesterday only. Okay, sir. Thank you very much for joining our live stream today, and we hope to have you back very soon to to discuss other stuff about the history of Bengal.
Thank you, Niranjan. Bengal, West
Thank you,
Bengal
sir.
is a beautiful land.
Yes, sir.
I like it very much. I have been to there countless times.
Okay.
You live
Okay.
in Calcutta?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so someday I hope to be again there
Yes, sir.
to meet you
Yes,
and
sir.
meet the
Looking
beautiful
forward.
people, good people of that area.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sir.
Niranjan.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys, for joining the live stream. See you at in the midnight live stream. Good night, guys.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো।